4 years ago, my father threw my suitcase onto the porch while I was 3 months pregnant and said, "Fix your mistake or don't come home." My mother, an ethics teacher, turned off the lights while I stood in the rain. The man I loved had vanished overseas, and I raised our son alone in a boarding house. Then, at a public development ceremony, the billionaire heir everyone in my hometown praised walked in, looked at my little boy, and said, "That's my son, and she was never the disgrace here. Thank you for being here with me today." Before the story begins, drop a quick comment and tell me, what are you doing right now while you listen? Driving, working, cooking, or just taking a moment to yourself? I read every comment. Quick note: this story includes some fictional elements to highlight the lesson, but the message it carries is what matters most. There are moments that divide your life into before and after, and I held one of those moments in my hand on a Tuesday evening in January 2021. Two pink lines on a plastic stick that would cost me everything I thought I knew about family. I am Saskia Mercer, 28 years old now, and 4 years ago, I was a 24-year-old urban planning student who believed love and good intentions were enough. I stood in the bathroom of Adrian Vale's apartment that night, the test still warm in my palm, and felt joy so complete it didn't occur to me to be afraid. Adrian Vale, 26 at the time, was the kind of man who looked perfect on paper. Yale MBA senior manager track at his father's firm, engagement ring hidden in a drawer he thought I didn't know about. When I walked out of that bathroom and showed him the test, his face transformed into pure, unguarded joy. "We're having a baby," he said like he couldn't believe the words. "God, Saskia, I need to tell my parents. They'll come around once they meet you." I should have heard the warning in that sentence, the assumption that his parents needed to come around. But I was 24 and pregnant and in love, so I smiled and said, "You don't have to tell them tonight. We have time." We were standing in his living room, warm lighting from lamps he'd chosen because I hated overhead fluorescence. Bookshelves lined one wall, moving boxes stacked near the door for his Munich training trip. 2 weeks abroad, back by Valentine's Day. His phone rang. I watched his expression change. Joy to confusion to something I would later recognize as fear. He looked at the screen. "Victor." "It's my father," Adrian said. "He never calls this late unless—" He answered. I couldn't hear Victor Vale's voice through the phone, but I could see Adrian's face tighten. The way he said, "Now," and, "but I was going to," and finally, just, "Okay, I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, looked at me, tried to smile. "Emergency meeting at the office. Some Munich paperwork issue. I'll be back in an hour." He kissed me, grabbed his keys, left. I didn't know then that Victor Vale had run Vale Holdings for 30 years. I didn't know the security camera in the apartment lobby had captured me arriving 47 minutes earlier with a pharmacy bag, or that Victor's assistant had already cross-referenced the timing of Adrian's sudden joy with a quick call to the nearest pharmacy 2 blocks away. Adrian called exactly 47 minutes after mentioning his parents. That wasn't coincidence. He came back at 2 a.m. I was still awake on his couch when I heard his key in the lock. 3 days later, he told me everything. Victor had been waiting in his office at Vale Holdings, glass walls, marble floors, space designed to make you feel small. Evelyn Vale, 57, sat on 4 charity boards and measured people by their last names. She was there too, silent near the window. They already knew, Adrian told me. We were in my apartment, afternoon light through windows that didn't quite close. "About you, about the pregnancy. Dad had a file on me. The Munich training isn't 2 weeks. It's 2 months. Binding contract, accept immediately, leave in 3 days, or forfeit my inheritance, scholarship funding, career track. Everything." "That's not legal," I said. "Contract I signed when I joined the company. Management training clause." He looked at me. I told him I wouldn't go, that we were having a baby. I remember thinking the worst part was watching someone you love realize in real time that the people who raised him had been planning his life in spreadsheets while he thought he was making his own choices. "What did he say?" "He said, This isn't punishment, son. It's protection. You'll thank me when you're 40 and running this company instead of changing diapers in a rented apartment. Adrian's voice was flat. I said, "You don't even know her. You've never met Saskia." And he cut me off. The contract is standard. Sign or don't. But understand what you're choosing to lose. Your mother didn't say a word. At the end, she asked if I wanted help packing. Silence. Outside Atlanta, traffic hummed. "I'm going," Adrian said finally, "to Munich. Just 2 months. Then I'm coming back and we're doing this together. I need to buy us time. Let him think he won. When I get back, we'll figure it out without his money if we have to." I wanted to believe him. He left 3 days later. I drove him to the airport, helped him check bags. We stood at security, and he held me like he could memorize it. 2 months, he said. "I'll call when I land. Every day, I promise." His phone buzzed. Text from VH training coordinator: surrender personal devices at security checkpoint, company phones, provided for program duration. "They're taking my phone for the training," he said. "I'll call when I land." I watched him walk through security. Watched a woman in a Vale Holdings blazer meet him on the other side, hand extended for his phone. Watched him surrender it. How do you fight a contract that turns love into a line item expense, a future into a forfeited asset? Adrian texted from the security line. "They're taking my phone for the training program. I'll call when I land." I didn't know then that Victor's assistant was standing 3 feet behind him, holding a company phone with a new number I would never have. I didn't know that every text I would send over the next 4 years would go into a folder labeled Archive Q4 that Adrian would never see. Those were the last words I received from Adrian Vale for 4 years. 2 weeks turned into 2 months, and my texts went from hopeful to desperate to silent. The first week I told myself he was busy with training. The second week, I started counting hours since my last text was marked delivered but not read: 47 hours, then 93. Then I stopped counting because numbers can't measure the specific weight of silence. I sat in my apartment alone, phone in hand, watching that single word, delivered. Not read. Just delivered, hanging in digital limbo like a message sent into space, waiting for someone to acknowledge its existence. I called. Once, twice, 20 times. The first 3 days the phone rang and went to voicemail. By day 4, something changed. The number I'd called 100 times suddenly wasn't in service. "Message cannot be delivered. User not found." You don't just stop existing. People don't vanish. Phone numbers don't disappear because someone crosses an ocean. I told myself there were explanations. International phones, training schedules, company security protocols. I told myself everything except the truth, that someone was making sure we couldn't find each other. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that on the same night I was sitting in my apartment at 2:14 a.m. trying his number one more time, Adrian was sitting in a Munich hotel room at 8:14 a.m. trying mine. Neither of us knew that Vale's assistant had answered my call once 3 days earlier, told Adrian, "She doesn't want to listen," then blocked my number before he could respond. Neither of us knew we were both reaching through the same wall from different sides. February came. My jeans stopped fitting. Morning sickness arrived exactly on schedule, textbook perfect at 6 weeks. I went to classes, took notes, came home and stared at my phone like it might suddenly explain itself. Silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of every terrible thing you imagine filling the space where a voice should be. I didn't tell anyone. Not my roommate, who I barely knew. Not my study group. Not my parents. Especially not my parents. But February turned into Sunday dinner at 1847 Peachtree Terrace, and some things you can't hide forever. Harold Mercer, 58, was Brookhaven Community Board president and the kind of man who measured success by how many people knew his name. He opened the door when I arrived, smiled that public smile, and ushered me into the dining room where everything was already set: matching plates, folded napkins, water glasses at precise angles. Marian Mercer, 56, taught ethics at Brookhaven High and served on 3 volunteer boards, always with that carefully composed smile that never reached her eyes. She was already seated, hands folded on the table, in that particular way she had when she'd been thinking about something for too long. Claire Mercer, 22 then and 26 now, was everything our parents wanted after I failed, poised, compliant, and permanently positioned in the center of every family photo. She sat at the far end of the table looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I'd worn a loose coat, kept it on through grace. But when I reached for the water glass, the coat pulled open and I saw my father's eyes go to my stomach and stop. "Saskia," he said, is that you need to tell us what's happened? Not congratulations, not, are you okay? What's happened? Like pregnancy was something that happened to you, not something you chose. "I'm pregnant," I said. 3 months. The silence that followed had texture, weight. My mother's hands didn't move from their folded position. "Who's the father?" Harold asked. I thought about Adrian, about the ring I wasn't supposed to know about texts marked delivered but never read, about the way he'd looked at me in that bathroom doorway 2 months ago, joy so complete it seemed impossible that it could just vanish. "That's not relevant right now," I said. My mother stood, walked to the sideboard, opened the 3rd drawer, not searching, not looking, but reaching for something she already knew was there. She pulled out a folder, set it on the table between us, slid it across the mahogany surface until it stopped exactly in front of my plate. "Dr. Morrison can see you Wednesday at 2, Marian said. "It's a simple procedure. You'll stay here during recovery and we'll tell people you were visiting schools for your graduate program." I opened the folder. Clinic paperwork, appointment forms, all filled out in my mother's precise handwriting. My name, my birth date, my insurance information, dated from 2 days ago. "You scheduled an appointment before asking my opinion," I said. "You filled out paperwork with my name before I even told you." "We've known for 3 weeks," my mother said. "Mrs. Patterson saw you at the pharmacy. She mentioned it at book club." 3 weeks. They'd known for 3 weeks and said nothing. Just watched me show up for Sunday dinners, waited for the right moment, prepared their solution in advance. "I'm not going," I said. "Saskia." My father's voice had that tone, the one he used at community board meetings when someone suggested something impractical. "You're 24. You're in graduate school. You're not married. You won't even tell us who the father is. How exactly do you plan to—" "I don't know," I said. "But not this. I'm not doing this." Claire made a small sound. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a sigh. Something satisfied. My mother picked up her napkin. I watched her fold it once. Smooth the crease with her thumb. Fold it again. If you've ever watched someone you've known your entire life become a stranger in the time it takes to fold a napkin 3 times, you understand why I didn't cry. I was too busy recognizing that I'd never actually known her at all. I learned that gesture when I was 8 years old. I'd asked why we couldn't adopt the shelter dog, the one with 3 legs that nobody wanted. My mother folded her napkin once. "We'll think about it." Folded it twice. "It's complicated." Folded it 3 times and placed it beside her plate with the precision of someone closing a file they would never open again. No dog, no discussion, case closed. She was using the same ritual now. 1 fold considering, 2 folds deciding, 3 folds final. She placed the napkin beside her plate. The clinic papers stayed on the table between us. My father's expression was set in that way that meant he'd already decided this was for my own good. I stood up from the table, and for the first time in my life, I didn't ask permission to leave. I said the word no out loud for the first time in my adult life, while standing in my parents' dining room 3 months pregnant, and watched my father's face do something I'd never seen before. It went completely blank, like someone had unplugged him, and was deciding whether to turn him back on. "No," I said again. "I'm not going to that appointment. I'm keeping my baby." The clinic papers stayed on the table between us. My mother's napkin sat folded 3 times beside her plate. Claire watched from the far end of the table with that same satisfied expression. Harold stood. Not quickly, deliberately. The way he stood at community board meetings when someone had wasted enough of his time. He walked past me, not toward me, past me, into the hallway. I heard the closet door open. The hall closet, the one where they kept winter coats and the vacuum cleaner and things that needed to be stored out of sight. He came back carrying a suitcase. Not just any suitcase, my suitcase. The navy blue one with the broken wheel that I'd left in my childhood bedroom when I moved to my apartment 2 years ago. He set it on the floor between us. The sound it made hitting the hardwood was too heavy, too full. "Your mother packed your things this morning," he said. His voice was flat, the same tone he used to announce budget cuts at board meetings. Before church, I stared at the suitcase, at the zipper that was straining slightly, at the handle that was already extended ready to roll. "You packed this," I said to my mother. "This morning, before you even asked me to dinner." She didn't answer, just sat there with her hands folded on the table that composed expression perfectly in place. "You knew," I said. "You knew before I walked in this door how this was going to end." "We gave you a choice," Harold said. "You made it." He picked up the suitcase, carried it to the front door, opened it. Rain was falling outside, not heavy but steady. February rain that was almost sleet. The porch light made the wet pavement shine. He set the suitcase on the porch, outside, in the rain. "Dad, hon," I said, "if you're not willing to make responsible decisions," he said, "then you're not welcome to make them under our roof. The clinic papers have my cell number. When you change your mind, call before Wednesday. Dr. Morrison is doing us a favor fitting you in." "And if I don't change my mind? Then I hope you've been saving your stipend money," he said, "because your mother and I won't be contributing to a mistake you're choosing to make. There's a specific kind of pain that comes from understanding, not suspecting, but knowing with absolute certainty that your parents spent their Sunday morning preparing to throw you away, like something that had stopped being useful." My mother had gone to church, sat through the service, come home and put a roast in the oven, set the table with the good plates. All while my suitcase sat packed in the hallway closet waiting. They'd planned this, not in the moment, not as a reaction. They'd spent hours that morning organizing my expulsion while I was still asleep in my apartment thinking I was going to my parents' house for dinner. "Get out," Harold said. Not loudly. He didn't need to be loud. He was Brookhaven Community Board president. He knew how to make a statement that couldn't be argued with. I looked at my mother. She was still sitting at the table napkin folded 3 times, hands composed, watching me with that same expression she'd worn when she told 8-year-old me we couldn't adopt the shelter dog. "Mom," I said. She didn't move. I walked to the door, past my father, out onto the porch where my suitcase was already getting wet. The handle was cold when I grabbed it. Behind me, I heard the door close, not slam. That would have been emotion. This was just a door closing with the efficient click of someone finishing a task. I stood there on the porch for a moment. Rain soaking through my coat. Suitcase handle cold and wet in my hand. Looking at the house I'd grown up in 1847, Peachtree Terrace, white columns, magnolia tree in the front yard. American flag on the porch that my father changed every 6 months whether it needed it or not. Through the sheer curtains on the front window I could see my mother. She'd stood from the table, walked into the front room. I watched her silhouette move to the window. She could see me. I knew she could see me standing there in the rain, and then she reached up. She turned off the light. The room went dark. Her silhouette disappeared. She'd looked at me, made eye contact through that window, and chosen to turn off the light, rather than keep watching what she'd done. The lights went off. She chose darkness over seeing me. That's the detail I'll remember when people ask why I never went back. Not the suitcase, not the rain. The lights. I picked up my suitcase and walked down the porch steps. The wheel that was already broken caught on the first step, and I had to lift it. My coat was soaked through. My shoes were soaked. The cold was starting to seep in, that February cold that gets into your bones. I walked down the driveway to the sidewalk, turned to look back one more time. Every light in the house was off now, not just the front room. Every single window was dark. Like no one lived there. Like I'd imagined the whole thing. I stood on the sidewalk in February rain, 3 months pregnant, with a suitcase my mother had packed while I was still asleep that morning. The house went dark behind me. I had $23 in my wallet, half a tank of gas in my car, and no idea where a person goes when the people who made them decide they'd rather pretend they never existed. My car was parked 2 houses down. I could drive somewhere, but where my apartment lease required parent co-signers, my father's signature was on the contract. My bank account was joint, with my mother's name opened when I was 16. My phone was on their family plan. I thought about the boarding house on Elm Street 3 blocks away, the one with the sign in the window, rooms weekly or monthly references not required. I picked up the suitcase and started walking. Agnes Donovan opened the door before I could knock. She'd been watching from the window, she said later, because in a neighborhood like Brookhaven, you learn to recognize the posture of someone who has just learned they have nowhere else to go. Agnes Brennan, 67, had lived in the same Brookhaven boarding house for 30 years and opened her door that rainy February night without asking a single question I couldn't answer. I stood on her porch at 11 p.m., soaked through, pregnant suitcase still dripping rain. "You'll take the room on the 2nd floor," she said. "Not a question. Bathroom's down the hall. Come inside." The house smelled like tea and old books. Wooden floors creaked. A kettle was already on the stove. I can pay," I said. "I have $23 and my next stipend check. Pay rent when you have money." Agnes said, pouring hot water into a waiting teapot. "First month is covered." "Why would you? You don't even know me." She looked at me. Really looked at me. "I knew your mother when she was young," she said. "She wasn't always like this." She didn't explain. Just handed me a towel and tea and showed me upstairs to a room with a narrow bed, clean sheets, and a window overlooking the street. 3 blocks from the house with all its lights turned off. "Sleep," Agnes said. "Everything else can wait." I sat on that bed and listened to rain on the tin roof. If you've never slept in a stranger's house because your own family locked the door behind you, you might not understand why I cried that night. Not from sadness, but from the specific relief of being treated with more kindness by someone who'd known me for 10 minutes than by people who'd known me for 24 years. I lived in that room for 6 weeks. Paid Agnes $80 weekly once my stipend came. Kept a notebook with the running balance. She asked about the baby once. "You keeping it?" I said yes, and she never asked again. March came. I finished graduate coursework from that 2nd floor room, attended Zoom meetings with my camera angled so no one could see I was 9 months pregnant. On a Tuesday morning in March at 4 a.m., my water broke. Patrice Coleman, 27, was the kind of friend who showed up at the hospital delivery room at 2 in the morning with a blanket from the gift shop and stayed until it was over. I'd met her in my urban planning cohort. She was the only person I'd told who didn't ask if I was sure. She drove me to Emory Hospital in her car with one headlight out. Dawn was just breaking over Atlanta. The delivery room was white. Fluorescent lights. No flowers, no family photos. Just machines and a window showing sky going from black to gray. Patrice held my hand when contractions got bad. Didn't tell me I should have called my mother. Didn't ask where the father was. At 6:30 a.m., when I couldn't think through the pain, I did something I knew I shouldn't. I texted my mother. 3 words, "I'm so scared." I watched the message send, delivered, read. Read at 7:02 a.m. She'd opened it, seen it, knew I was terrified and in labor. The phone stayed silent. Noah was born at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in March 2021, 6 pounds 11 ounces, with curly dark hair that came from neither my side nor any Mercer I had ever met. The nurse asked for the father's name for the birth certificate. "Just my name," I said. "Just mine." Patrice left around noon for work. Stopped at the gift shop, came back with a yellow blanket with white stars. $12. His first present, she said, from his Aunt Patrice. She took a photo before leaving. Me exhausted, holding a baby wrapped in that $12 blanket. Hair a mess. Eyes half closed. Noah's tiny fist wrapped around my finger. After Patrice left, it was just us. Me and Noah. In a white room with fluorescent lights and morning sun through the window. There's a sound that happens in a hospital room when you're the only person there to hear your baby's first cry. It's not just the baby crying, it's the echo of all the voices that should be there and aren't. I held him against my chest, his entire fist wrapped around my index finger. He had Adrian's eyes, dark brown, almost black. The same eyes I'd looked into 10 months ago when I told him I was pregnant and he'd looked so happy. Adrian, who was somewhere thinking I'd stopped loving him because that's what his father's assistant had told him. Who had no idea any of this had happened. Just the two of us, I whispered to Noah. But Mom will make it enough. I promise you that. I made a promise I didn't know if I could keep that. I would be enough for him, even though I suddenly wasn't sure I was enough for myself. Patrice had taken that photo, me exhausted, holding a 6-pound, 11-ounce baby with curly, dark hair that came from neither my side nor any Mercer anyone had ever met. That photo stayed on my phone for 4 years as the only picture I had of Noah's first day. I never posted it anywhere. I didn't want anyone from either family to see what they were missing. While I was holding Noah for the first time in that hospital room 43 miles away, Oliver Garrett was sitting in his office at Vale Holdings, staring at an email from Victor Vale that would determine whether my son would ever meet his father. And Oliver Garrett, 45 years old, and father to a daughter who'd been abandoned while pregnant 7 years earlier, was about to make a choice that would change all of our lives. I didn't know this was happening. I wouldn't know for 4 years. But this is what I learned later, and this is how the truth stayed alive when everyone with power wanted it dead. Oliver Garrett, 45, had been Victor Vale's executive secretary for 12 years and learned to keep 3 kinds of files official archived and the ones that might matter someday. On Tuesday, March the 16th, 2021, at 3:47 p.m., Oliver received an email from Victor Vale with the subject line, "Action required, immediate." The email had 2 sentences. Delete all messages from Saskia Mercer to Adrian Vale's company account effective immediately. Confirm when complete. Oliver had been expecting this. He'd been routing those messages to a separate folder for 6 weeks, ever since Victor had ordered Adrian's personal phone confiscated and replaced with a company device. He'd watched the messages pile up, watched them change. He opened Adrian's email archive now, searched Saskia Mercer. 47 results. He clicked on the first one dated February 1st, 2 weeks after Adrian left for Munich. "Adrian, I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call when you can." Then, February 3rd. "I tried your phone, but it's disconnected. Is everything okay? Please email me back." February 8th. "I don't understand why you're not responding. If you don't want to talk to me, at least tell me that. Please." February 15th. "I'm pregnant. You already know that. But I need to tell you something else happened and I need your help." February 23rd. "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Please just tell me you got these messages." March 10th. "I'm going to have this baby. I'm keeping our baby. I wish you could know that." March 14th. 2 days until my due date. I keep thinking you would have wanted to be here. I hope you're happy in Munich. I hope that was worth this." Oliver sat in his office chair staring at the screen. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Gray carpet showed tracks from the vacuum cleaner. On his desk next to his keyboard sat a framed photo of a young woman holding a toddler. Emma Garrett, Oliver's daughter, had been 19 and pregnant 7 years ago when her boyfriend's family paid her to disappear. Oliver kept her photo on his desk as reminder of what powerful families do to inconvenient young women. He'd watched it happen to Emma, watched her boyfriend's parents' old money country club law firm with their name on the building write a check and make his daughter sign papers that said she'd never contact their son again. Watched Emma come home with that check and 16 weeks pregnant and no way to finish her sophomore year of college. Emma was 26 now. Her son was 6. The boyfriend had never met him. Emma worked as a paralegal at a firm that wasn't her ex's family's firm. She paid her own rent. I learned later that Oliver sat in that office chair for 11 minutes, doing nothing but reading my emails, not because he was deciding whether to save them, but because he was reading them the way a father reads messages from a daughter he failed to protect, and he was deciding not to fail someone else's daughter the same way. At 3:58 p.m., Oliver created a new folder in the Vale Holdings server system. He named it Archive Q4. Not Saskia Mercer, not Adrian Personal, not anything that would make someone curious, just Archive Q4, the kind of name that makes executives' eyes glaze over, the kind of bureaucratic label that ensures no one ever opens it unless they're specifically looking for quarterly archives from years ago. Oliver had helped design Vale Holdings' filing system. He knew exactly how to hide something in plain sight. He moved all 47 emails into the Archive Q4 folder. Every single message from me that Adrian had never seen because they'd been intercepted before they reached him. Every text converted to email by the forwarding service I'd set up when his phone stopped working. Every desperate attempt I'd made to reach the father of my child. Then Oliver opened a new email to Victor Vale. Subject: reaction required, immediate. Body: all messages deleted per your instruction. No backup copies exist. He moved his cursor to send. Paused. Looked at Emma's photo on his desk. Sent the email. Then he cleared his search history, logged out of Adrian's account, and shut down his computer. You might wonder why Oliver didn't tell Adrian right then, didn't forward him even one of those 47 messages. But Oliver understood something I wouldn't understand for 4 years. That evidence matters more when you hold it until the moment it can actually change something, not when it just confirms what was already done. Adrian was in Munich, under contract, under Victor's control. Even if he'd known about the baby, about me trying to reach him, what could he have done from 3,000 miles away with his inheritance and his career in his father's hands? Oliver was thinking longer term. He was thinking about the moment Adrian came back. The moment he had leverage. The moment the truth could actually shift the power. So he kept the folder. Backed up automatically every night by systems he'd designed. Protected by the most effective security measure possible, a boring name that no executive would ever bother opening. Oliver Garrett closed the Archive Q4 folder at 4:17 p.m., cleared his search history, and went home to his daughter, Emma, and grandson. He watched 3 evenings a week. The folder sat in Vale Holdings' server for the next 4 years, backed up automatically every night by systems Oliver had helped design, protected by the one person in that building who understood that sometimes the only power you have is choosing what not to destroy. I didn't know any of this was happening. I was 3 miles away learning to change a diaper on a baby whose father's phone number had been disconnected and whose grandparents had chosen to pretend we didn't exist. I didn't know about Oliver's folder. I wouldn't for 4 years. All I knew by June 2021, 3 months after Noah was born, was that exhaustion doesn't feel like tiredness. It feels like moving through water that gets thicker every day until you're not sure if you're swimming or drowning, and the only thing keeping you afloat is a 3-month-old baby who needs you to keep moving anyway. My life had a rhythm by then. Night shift at Rosie's Diner on Ponce de Leon, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., home by 6:30. Feed Noah. Sleep from 7 to 10 if he let me. Wake. Feed him again. Try to study for the one summer course I was taking online. Feed him. Change him. Walk him around the boarding house when he cried. Repeat. Patrice came by Tuesdays with groceries she claimed were on sale but never had receipts for. I kept a notebook of what I owed her. She kept pretending she didn't notice. On a Tuesday afternoon in June, I was changing Noah on Agnes's kitchen table. Agnes had cleared a space, put down a towel, said the upstairs was too hot in summer. Noah was 3 months old, still in that phase where babies look like they're deciding whether existence is worth the trouble. I was talking to him the way you talk to babies when no one's listening. Nonsense words. There's my boy. Such a good boy. You're okay. We're okay. And he smiled. Not gas. Not a grimace. A real smile. Toothless, gummy, transformative. His whole face changed. His eyes lit up like he'd just discovered I was the most interesting thing in the universe. I made a sound I didn't know I could make. Something between a laugh and a sob. There you are, I whispered. There's my boy. You've been in there the whole time, haven't you? I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, took a photo, then another, then 3 more because the first ones were blurry. If you've ever experienced a moment of pure joy so intense, it makes you forget you're barely surviving a baby's first smile, a toothless grin that says, I see you, I know you, you matter. Then you can't understand why I stood in that kitchen crying while Agnes tactfully found something to do in the other room. I looked at the photos, Noah's face mid-smile, eyes bright. I opened my messages, scrolled to Adrian's contact. My thumb hovered over it. 5 months. His number had been disconnected for 5 months, and I was still checking my phone like he might text saying it was all a mistake. I closed Adrian's contact, opened Patrice's instead. First smile today, sending photo, we're okay. 2 days later, Thursday morning at 10 a.m., I did something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I drove to Vale Holdings with Noah in his stroller. I'd thought about it during every 2 a.m. feeding. Adrian deserved to know his son existed. Whatever his father had done, whatever control Victor had over his life, Adrian deserved to know. The Vale Holdings building was all glass and steel in downtown Atlanta. Revolving doors, marble lobby. The kind of place where my diner uniform and secondhand stroller looked wrong just existing in the space. Dennis Crawford, Vale Holdings lobby security, had worked the desk for 6 years and learned not to ask questions when executives' names appeared on the do not admit list. He looked up when I approached. Can I help you? I need to see Adrian Vale, I said. I just need 5 minutes. Can you call up to his office? Dennis looked at his computer screen, typed something. His expression changed. Do you have an appointment? No, but if you could just... I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not on the visitor registry. I understand that, but this is important. I need to see Adrian Vale, please. Just 5 minutes. Dennis picked up his phone, spoke quietly. I couldn't hear what he said. He hung up. Ma'am, I've been instructed to ask you to leave the premises, I'm sorry. Instructed by who? I'm not at liberty to say, but I need to ask you to leave. Noah started fussing in his stroller. I looked down at him. 3 months old. Curly dark hair. His father's eyes. The father who worked 43 floors above us and didn't know we existed. Can you at least tell him I was here? I asked. Can you tell Adrian Vale that Saskia Mercer came by? Dennis's expression was careful, professional. I'll make a note in the log, but ma'am, you need to leave now. I left. 3 days later, on Sunday afternoon, a letter arrived at Agnes's boarding house via certified mail. Thick envelope. Law firm logo in the corner, Whitfield and Associates. I opened it in my room. Noah was napping in the bassinet Agnes had found at a yard sale. The letter was on heavy paper. Official, legal. Dear Ms. Mercer, our firm represents Vale Holdings and the Vale family. We have been informed that you attempted to gain unauthorized access to Vale Holdings property on June 17, 2021. This letter serves as formal notice that any further attempts to contact, approach, or communicate with any member of the Vale family or any Vale Holdings employee will be considered harassment and may result in legal action, including restraining orders and criminal charges. This is your only warning. I read it twice. Harassment charges, I said to the empty room. They're calling it harassment. I'm trying to tell him he has a son, and they're threatening to call it harassment. There's a specific kind of powerlessness that comes from holding a legal document that turns your truth into a threat, your son's existence into harassment, your love into something prosecutable. I folded the letter, put it in my bedroom drawer beneath Noah's birth certificate where father's name was still blank. I closed the drawer and made a promise to myself that I wouldn't open it again, wouldn't use my son as a weapon or a bargaining chip no matter how much I wanted Adrian to know the truth. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for 4 more years, was that 47 emails I'd sent him were sitting in a folder 43 miles away, and the man who'd hidden them was waiting for the right moment to bring them back. By then, Harold and Marion had started building something in the neighborhood, a reputation for family values that stood on the foundation of pretending I didn't exist. The legal letters stayed in my drawer. The emails I didn't know existed stayed in Oliver's folder. And while I was working night shifts and learning to function on 4 hours of sleep, my parents were doing what they did best, building their reputation on the foundation of pretending I didn't exist. Patrice Coleman called me on a Thursday afternoon in September to tell me my mother was using my life as a cautionary tale in her ethics class at Brookhaven High, not as my life, but as a hypothetical scenario about a young woman who made poor choices. And I realized that being erased from your family doesn't mean they've forgotten you. It means they've rewritten you into the villain of a story that makes them look better. I was feeding Noah when Patrice called. He was 6 months old, just starting to sit up on his own. "Sask, I need to tell you something," Patrice said. "And I need you to not throw your phone after I say it." "What happened?" "Your mother used your story in class today." I stopped mid-spoonful of mashed banana. "What do you mean, used my story?" "I'm taking that night class at Brookhaven High, remember community ethics. Your mother's teaching it." Patrice's voice was careful, angry on my behalf. She was doing a unit on consequences of impulsive decisions. She told this story about a young woman, intelligent but impractical, who became pregnant and refused family guidance, now raising a child alone in difficult circumstances. She said that, word for word. Students started asking questions. Was it a true story, someone they knew? And your mother said. Patrice stopped. She said it was hypothetical, but based on patterns she'd observed over years of teaching. I set the baby food down. Noah made a noise of protest. She described everything, Patrice continued. The pregnancy, the family trying to help the young woman's refusal to accept guidance. She painted herself as the concerned parent who tried everything. Everyone in that classroom was learning your life as a cautionary tale, and you weren't even there to defend yourself. If you've never had someone take the worst moment of your life and turn it into a teaching tool while you're still living through it, not to help you, but to elevate themselves, then you can't understand the specific rage that comes from being simultaneously erased and exploited by the same person. "Did she use my name?" I asked. "No. But Sask, she described you. Your age, your education level, the timeline. Anyone who knows her has a daughter would know. But she's telling everyone I'm in Charlotte," I said. "How would they?" "She's telling her students you're a hypothetical. She's telling the neighborhood you're in Charlotte. She's got 2 stories, and somehow she's managing to believe both." I looked at Noah Banana on his face, watching me with Adrian's dark eyes. 6 months old. Already a cautionary tale in my mother's classroom, and he'd never even met her. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "I'm sorry," Patrice said. "I just thought you should know." After I hung up, I finished feeding Noah, cleaned his face, put him down for his nap, went about my day like I hadn't just learned my mother was weaponizing my pain for moral authority. What else could I do? 2 months later, in November, Harold spoke at the Brookhaven Neighborhood Association meeting. Agnes went. She'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, actually cared about zoning issues. She came home and found me in the kitchen making Noah's bottles for the next day. He was 8 months old by then, starting to crawl. "Your father spoke tonight," Agnes said. She was making tea, that thing she did when she had news she wasn't sure how to deliver. "About what?" "Family responsibility, community values, the usual." Agnes poured hot water. Margaret Brennan was there. Margaret Calloway, longtime Brookhaven resident and neighborhood watch coordinator, had known the Mercer family since I was in elementary school and taught me piano for 3 years. She asked about you, Agnes continued. After the meeting, asked Harold how you were doing, said she hadn't seen you around lately. I stopped measuring formula. What did he say? He said you're working in Charlotte, doing very well for yourself. He said you keep in touch email every week or so. Agnes set her teacup down carefully. Said it so smoothly I almost believed him myself, and I see you walk past his house twice a week on your way to the bus stop. He said I keep in touch. Said you email every week. Told Margaret you've got a great job in city planning, really building a career. I finished making the bottles. Put them in Agnes's refrigerator. Noah was asleep upstairs. I had a shift at the diner in 3 hours. He believes it, I said. Doesn't he? He's said it so many times he's starting to believe it. Agnes looked at me with that expression that said she'd seen a lot of things in 67 years, and very little of it surprised her anymore. People will believe anything if it makes them look good, she said, especially if they repeat it enough times. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones people tell to deceive others, they're the ones people repeat until they forget they're lying, until fiction becomes memory and memory becomes truth. That never happened. I learned later, much later, that Harold told that lie at 14 different community meetings over the next 2 years. And each time, the details got more elaborate. My apartment overlooking downtown Charlotte. My important meetings with city council members. The phone calls every Sunday where I told him about my week. He added details the way you add details to a real memory. Small things, specific things, the kind of things that make a story true. Except I was 3 miles away on Elm Street working night shifts at a diner raising his grandson in a boarding house room with a window that didn't quite close and a heater that only worked on Tuesdays. While my parents were building their reputation on my absence, I was building something too, just smaller, quieter, and 3 miles away where they'd never have to see it. Started to see the daughter who kept in touch, instead of the one he'd thrown out in the rain. The human mind will do anything to make itself the hero of its own story, even if it has to invent a completely different story to do it. While my parents were building their reputation on my absence, I was building something too, just smaller, quieter, and 3 miles away, where they'd never have to see it. Harold told his Charlotte lie at 14 meetings over 2 years. I know because Agnes kept count not out of cruelty, but because she believed someone should witness what was happening even if I couldn't stop it. There's a particular kind of pain that comes from seeing a family photo that includes everyone except you, and knowing the empty space where you should be standing isn't an oversight. It's the point. Patrice showed me the photo on a Tuesday evening in January 2022. Noah was 10 months old, just learning to pull himself up on furniture. We were in Agnes's kitchen. Patrice had stopped by after work with groceries that were supposedly on sale. You don't have to look at this if you don't want to, Patrice said, holding her phone. What is it? Community newsletter, winter festival coverage. She turned the phone toward me. Claire stood on an outdoor stage, microphone in hand, wearing a red dress that photographed well under the LED lights they'd strung across the Brookhaven pavilion. Harold and Marion sat in the front row, both beaming. Perfect family of 3. I looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. That's my coat, I said. The red one. I left it in my closet when Marion gave it to Claire. It was my winter coat from high school. The good one. The one that had cost my mother 2 months of planning because it was expensive, and I'd outgrown my old one and you couldn't show up to school functions in something that looked cheap. Claire was wearing it in the photo. It fit her better than it had ever fit me. I handed the phone back. They look happy. That's good for them. Patrice didn't say anything. Just put her phone away and changed the subject. What she didn't tell me then, what I learned later from Agnes, was that Claire knew I lived nearby. Agnes had seen Claire drive past Elm Street twice in November, slowing down at the boarding house staring, then driving on without stopping. Claire knew. She knew I was 3 miles away with Noah. And she chose to stand in that family photo anyway, wearing my coat. letting Harold and Marion compose their perfect picture while their grandson slept in a second-floor room where the heater only worked on Tuesdays. Being erased from your family isn't like being written out of a story. It's like being airbrushed out of a photo so thoroughly that the people standing where you used to be don't even notice the empty space. They just move closer together and smile wider for the camera. 2 months later, the week of Noah's first birthday in March 2022, I registered to retake my urban planning course through Georgia Tech's continuing education program. Online, night classes after Noah went to sleep. It cost me $247 I'd saved over 8 weeks from diner tips. I paid it in cash at the registrar's office and felt like I'd bought something that might actually change my life instead of just helping me survive it. The first module was Community Housing Rights and Tenant Protections. I opened it at midnight after my shift, sitting at the narrow desk in my room. Noah asleep in the bassinet 5 feet away. Single lamp, textbooks I'd borrowed from the library. I started reading, got halfway through page 2, stopped. Read it again. Tenant Protections under Section 8. I read aloud quiet enough not to wake Noah. Displacement mitigation strategies? I've been saying this. For 6 months, I've been telling Mrs. Rodriguez exactly this, and I didn't even know it had a name. I'd been volunteering at Brookhaven Community Resource Center 3 afternoons a week since September. Just showing up asking if anyone needed help with paperwork, housing applications, benefit forms. The kinds of forms that look simple until you're the one trying to fill them out while working 2 jobs and raising kids and trying not to get evicted. I'd been helping people with exactly what this textbook was describing. I'd been doing it instinctively without the technical terms, without knowing I was applying principles that had names and theory behind them. I knew this. I'd learned it by living through it. I grabbed a blank piece of paper from the stack next to my laptop. Blue pen. Wrote, Community Development Fund one day. Stared at it for a full minute. One day when I finish this degree, I said to the empty room. One day when I have letters after my name that make people listen. I taped it to the wall above my desk. The wall was bare except for that single piece of paper and the tape holding it there. I don't know if I believe this yet, I said. But maybe if I write it down and look at it every morning, I'll start to. If you've ever had to teach yourself something because no one thought you deserved to learn it, you understand why that taped note mattered so much. Not because it was a promise I knew I could keep, but because it was the first promise I'd made to myself that had nothing to do with just surviving until tomorrow. I'd spent a year surviving. Just surviving. Getting through shifts. Getting home before Noah woke up. Keeping us fed. Keeping us housed. Keeping us alive. This was different. This was wanting something that wasn't about tonight or tomorrow or next week. This was wanting something that might not happen for years. That felt dangerous, like hoping for something you can't afford to lose. I looked at the note on the wall. Community Development Fund one day. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know how I'd get there. I only knew that if I wrote it down, it wouldn't disappear when I got too tired to remember I'd ever wanted anything beyond making it through the night shift and getting home before Noah woke up asking for me. That note stayed on my wall for 2.5 years. Community Development Fund one day. Written in blue pen on paper that yellowed at the edges but never fell down because I taped it like I meant it. I didn't know what it meant when I wrote it. I only knew that if I wrote it down, it wouldn't disappear when I got too tired to remember I'd ever wanted anything beyond making it through the night shift and getting home before Noah woke up asking for me. 18 months later, I would read that note again and realize I'd been building toward it the entire time without even knowing. 18 months passed. Noah grew. My case spreadsheet grew. And without noticing exactly when it happened, I started understanding what I'd been building toward. Tom Kowalski, 72, retired postal worker who'd lived in Brookhaven for 43 years, had been fighting his landlord's eviction notice for 6 months before I explained he had legal protections he didn't know existed. He sat across from me at the Brookhaven Community Resource Center on a Thursday afternoon in September 2022, holding housing paperwork he'd been trying to understand for half a year, and said the sentence that made me realize I'd been building something real without even noticing. "You're the first person in 10 years who's explained this to me like I'm a human being who deserves to understand the words that decide where I get to live." We were in the small nonprofit office, wooden table file folders stacked in corners, afternoon sun coming through dusty windows, smell of old coffee and copy paper. This was Tom's fifth visit. His landlord was trying to evict him from the apartment he'd lived in for 23 years. "You have rights, Mr. Kowalski," I said. "You've lived there 23 years. The law says they can't just here. Let me show you Section 8.304. I pulled up the statute on my laptop, walked him through it. Not just what the words meant, but why they mattered, what they protected, what his landlord was trying to do, and why it wasn't legal. He read it twice, then looked at me. "So they can't evict me for this. Not legally. Not with this paperwork. You file this form and they have to stop the eviction proceeding until they can prove actual cause, which they can't because your lease agreement guarantees fixed rent through the end of the term, and a 15% increase mid-lease violates your contract under Georgia landlord-tenant law." Tom took the papers, held them like they were something precious. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for this, for treating me like I deserve to know." After he left, I sat at that wooden table for a minute. Then I opened my laptop. Opened the Excel file I'd been keeping. Case 47. I typed Tom Kowalski, 23-year tenant. Landlord attempted illegal eviction. Resolution tenant rights documentation provided Section 8.304 protections explained. Pattern landlord targeting elderly residents who don't know their rights. I'd been doing this for 7 months. 3 afternoons a week. Completely unpaid. Just showing up, helping people with their paperwork, and tracking every case in this spreadsheet nobody asked me to create. 47 cases, all documented. Names, issues, resolutions patterns. I was seeing things. Patterns across the neighborhood. The same landlords using the same tactics. The same agencies denying the same benefits for the same invented reasons. The same vulnerable residents being targeted because nobody thought they'd fight back. If you've ever built something valuable that nobody asked you to build, not for money, not for credit, just because you saw a problem and couldn't walk past it anymore, you understand why that Excel spreadsheet with 47 rows mattered more than any diploma I never finished getting. I saved the file, looked at the time, had to get home to relieve Agnes, who was watching Noah, 18 months old, learning to run, learning words, growing up while I was building something I didn't even know mattered yet. The next part happened 18 months later. March 2024, Noah's 4th birthday week. We were in Agnes's front yard on a Saturday afternoon. Yellow grass, Noah's toys scattered everywhere. I was sitting on the porch steps with my laptop finishing coursework for my urban planning program online classes night sessions 2 years in and almost done. Agnes brought out 2 lemonades, set one beside my laptop. "You're going to go blind working on that porch," she said. "Just finishing this module. Noah's playing with Tyler from next door." Tyler was 5. His grandmother brought him over sometimes. The 2 boys ran around Agnes's yard making the kinds of noises that mean everyone's happy and nobody's bleeding. Around 3 p.m., Tyler's grandmother came to pick him up. Older woman, gray hair, patient smile. She called Tyler over, took his hand, walked him home 3 houses down. Noah watched them go, then turned to me. "Mama," he said, "why does Tyler get grandparents to pick him up but I don't get grandparents?" I closed my laptop. 4 years ago, this question would have broken me. 2 years ago, it would have made me cry. 1 year ago, I would have changed the subject. But this was March 2024, and I'd been carrying this grief long enough to know how to hold it without bleeding. "Your grandparents are very busy, sweetheart," I said. "But you have Grandma Agnes and she loves you very much." Noah looked at Agnes on the porch. then back at me. Okay, he said, and ran back to playing with his trucks. Just like that, accepted completely, moved on. The day you can answer your child's hardest question without crying isn't the day you've forgotten the pain. It's the day you've learned to carry it in a way that doesn't break you every time someone asks where it came from. Agnes looked at me, didn't say anything, just nodded once. I went back to my coursework. Noah played in the grass. The afternoon sun was warm. I thought about my parents for the first time in weeks that afternoon, watching Noah run across Agnes's yard with his curly dark hair catching the March sunlight. Not with anger, not with the old grinding grief that used to wake me up at 3 a.m. Just with the simple realization that they were missing this missing him, learning to ask questions, missing the way he mispronounced lemonade as Lemondale, missing every ordinary moment that made up a childhood they'd chosen not to witness. They were missing him, and I'd healed enough that their loss didn't feel like mine anymore. 2 weeks later, something changed. Adrian Vale came back to America, and the 4 years of silence I'd built my life around were about to collapse, in a way I never expected. 2 weeks after that March afternoon when Noah asked about grandparents, something changed that I wouldn't know about for days. What I didn't know that September, what I wouldn't learn until Oliver Garrett told Adrian everything in a coffee shop 3 days later, was that Adrian Vale came back to America on a Thursday afternoon, walked into Vale Holdings on Friday morning with his promotion letter and his Munich tan. He'd been back for 5 months before the email migration happened, 5 months of settling back into Atlanta, navigating his father's expectations, and believing the silence between us was exactly what my last message to him had suggested, that I was sorry I'd bothered him, and accidentally discovered that his father had been lying to him for 4 years before he even made it to lunch. I learned all of this later, much later. This is what Oliver told me happened. Adrian Vale walked into Vale Holdings at 8:47 a.m. on his first day back. After 4 years in Munich. Senior Manager of Development, corner office on the 14th floor, new computer, new login, fresh start. IT came by at 10:30 a.m. to migrate his old email account to the new system. Standard procedure. Move old files, update settings, make sure everything transferred. At 10:47 a.m. a notification appeared on Adrian's screen, 47 messages restored from archive. Adrian clicked it. The sender address was one he recognized instantly even after 4 years, saskia.mercer@gmail.com. 47 messages, all marked archived, not deleted. Dates spanning March 2021 to June 2021. Adrian opened the first one. March 8, 2021. Adrian, I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call when you can. He opened the second. March 10th. I tried your phone but it's disconnected. Is everything okay? Please email me back. March 15th. I don't understand why you're not responding. March 23rd. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Please just tell me you got these messages. April 2nd. I'm going to have this baby. Adrian stopped reading, looked at the message count. 47. All archived. None had ever appeared in his inbox during those 4 years. All had been moved directly to a folder marked Archive Q4 by someone with system administrator access. Oliver told me later that Adrian's face did something he'd never seen before when those 47 email subject lines appeared on the screen. It went completely still, the way a person's face goes still when they're doing math in their head about how many lies they've believed and how many years they've lost to believing them. Adrian looked across the office. Oliver Garrett sat at his desk 3 rows away. Their eyes met. Oliver said nothing, but his expression confirmed everything. Adrian typed my email address into the search bar. 47 results. Chronological order. March through June 2021. Subject lines visible. Adrian, please call. I need to talk to you. It's important. I'm scared. Please respond. I don't understand. Are you getting these? The dates got closer together. The subject lines got more desperate. The last one was dated June 14th, 2021. I tried to see you today. They sent me away. I'm sorry I bothered you. June 14th, 2021. 3 days after I'd gone to Vale Holdings with Noah in his stroller. 3 days after security turned me away. 3 days after the legal letter arrived threatening harassment charges. Adrian closed the email window, stood up, walked across the office to Oliver's desk, spoke quietly enough that no one else could hear. Coffee, Adrian said. Now, don't tell me you don't know what I'm talking about. Oliver stood, gathered his jacket. The place on Peachtree, Oliver said. Not the one in the building. They left the office together. Adrian with his laptop. Oliver with 4 years of truth he'd been waiting to tell. What Adrian didn't say out loud, what Oliver told me he saw in Adrian's expression, was the realization that the messages weren't lost accidentally. They were hidden deliberately. Someone with system access had created that archive folder. Someone had moved every single email I sent directly into storage where Adrian would never see them. Archived, not deleted. That distinction mattered. Deletion could be accidental. Archiving was intentional. Someone had read those messages, decided Adrian shouldn't see them, and filed them away with a bureaucratic label that ensured they'd never surface. Until IT migrated the account and restored everything the system thought had been accidentally moved. If you've ever discovered that someone took 4 years of your life and hid them in a folder labeled with a code, only they could find you. Understand why Adrian didn't yell, didn't throw anything, just closed his laptop and said 2 words to the man who'd kept the evidence: coffee. Now. Oliver would tell me later, months later, after everything else had happened, that he'd been waiting for that moment for 4 years, waiting for Adrian to come back from Munich, waiting for the right circumstances, waiting for the moment when the truth would matter more than the cost of telling it. He'd known that IT migration would restore those messages. He'd helped design the email system. He knew exactly what would happen when they moved Adrian's account. He'd been counting on it. Adrian Vale stared at those 47 email subject lines for 11 minutes. Oliver timed it, later said he watched Adrian's reflection in the office window, doing nothing but reading and rereading the dates. The desperate subject lines, the name of the woman he'd been told had moved on and didn't want to hear from him. 47 times I'd reached out. 47 times someone had made sure my voice never reached him. And Adrian had just spent his first day back in America, discovering that the silence he'd believed for 4 years was a lie someone had carefully maintained. 3 days later, Oliver would tell him everything in that coffee shop, and Adrian would learn not just that I'd tried to contact him, but why I'd stopped trying and what his father had threatened me with to make sure I stayed silent. 3 days passed between Adrian discovering those 47 emails and the Monday evening when Oliver Garrett sat across from him at a coffee shop on Peachtree Street with 2 cups of coffee neither of them would drink. I learned all of this later. Oliver told me months after what happened in that booth. Oliver had been preparing for this conversation for 4 years. He'd rehearsed it, planned it, knew exactly what he was going to say and in what order. But before he could start, Adrian said 5 words that made Oliver realize this conversation was going to be harder than he'd thought. Was there a baby? Oliver stopped. The confession he'd prepared, chronological, systematic, all the evidence laid out, suddenly seemed irrelevant. In those emails, Adrian continued. His voice was steady, too steady. She was scared. She needed to talk to me. Was there a baby? Oliver set down the folder he'd brought. Printouts of email subject lines, copies of documents he'd saved, 4 years of evidence. Yes, Oliver said. How old? 3 years old now, almost 4, I think. Born March 2021. Adrian did math in his head. I left in January. She was already pregnant when I left, when they sent me to Munich. Yes, and she tried to tell me, 47 times between March and June. Then she stopped. Adrian leaned back in the booth, looked at the ceiling, came back. Tell me everything, he said. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. So Oliver told him. March 2021. Victor's email: delete all messages from Saskia Mercer effective immediately. Oliver creating the archive Q4 folder instead. Moving every email there, saving them where no one would think to look. The assistant Victor's assistant intercepting my phone calls. Answering when I called, telling Adrian she doesn't want to listen, then hanging up. Blocking my number on Adrian's company phone. The same assistant intercepting Adrian's return calls to me. Answering my phone how she got my number. Oliver didn't know, but he suspected she'd copied it from the intercepted emails and telling Adrian, she's moved on, in a woman's voice. That wasn't mine. Both of us trying to reach each other. Neither of us succeeding because there was someone in the middle making sure we never connected. And then, Oliver said, June 2021, she came here, to Vale Holdings, with a baby in a stroller. Adrian's jaw tightened. Security called upstairs per your father's standing order. She was turned away at the lobby. Never made it past the desk. There was a standing order. Since March, your father's instructions were clear: if Saskia Mercer attempts to enter the building, turn her away. Document it, report it to legal. Oliver pulled out a paper from his folder. Legal letterhead. Whitfield and Associates. This was sent 3 days later. Certified mail to her address. Threatening harassment charges if she approached any Vale Holdings property or employee again. Oliver told me later that Adrian's hands were shaking when he picked up that printout. Not with grief, not with confusion, but with the specific rage that comes from realizing your entire life for 4 years has been a story someone else wrote, and you just believed every word because you trusted the people holding the pen. Adrian read the letter, set it down, picked it up, read it again. He threatened her with lawyers. While she had a while, she had my... He couldn't finish the sentence. Yes, Oliver said. Why are you telling me this now? Adrian asked. You've known for 4 years. Why now? Oliver folded his hands on the table. This part he had rehearsed. My daughter Emma, he said. 7 years ago, she was 19 and pregnant. Her boyfriend's family, old money law firm with their name on the building, they made her disappear, paid her off, made her sign papers saying she'd never contact their son again. Adrian looked at him. I watched it happen, Oliver continued. I couldn't stop it. Emma was an adult, she made her choice, and I had to watch my daughter get erased from someone's life because his family had money and lawyers and power. And you saw the same thing happening to Saskia. I saw your father do to her exactly what Emma's boyfriend's family did to Emma. Except worse, because you didn't know. You weren't choosing. Someone was choosing for you. So you kept the evidence. I kept the evidence for 4 years, waiting for the right moment. Why not tell me sooner? Because you were in Munich under contract, under your father's control. Even if you'd known, what could you have done 3,000 miles away? Adrian nodded slowly. And now, last week your father showed me a list. More suitable women for you, with background checks attached. Financial assessments, family histories. He is already planning your next relationship. Oliver pushed the folder across the table. All 47 email subject lines printed. The legal letter. The timeline of intercepted calls. I couldn't watch it happen again, Oliver said. I couldn't watch him erase another woman because she didn't fit the approved profile, not when I had the evidence to stop it. If you've ever learned that someone used lawyers and corporate power to erase a woman and baby from your life, while you were halfway around the world believing she'd simply chosen to move on you, understand why Adrian didn't ask Oliver why he'd waited 4 years to tell him. He understood exactly why, because evidence only matters when the person who needs to see it is finally ready to do something about it. Adrian sat with the folder for a long time, reading, not reading, just holding it. Where is she? He asked finally. I don't know her address, but she volunteers at Brookhaven Community Resource Center, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Adrian pulled out his phone. His hands were steadier than Oliver expected, not the hands of someone about to make an emotional call, but the hands of someone about to execute a plan. He opened Google Maps, typed Brookhaven Community Resource Center. Oliver watched him do something he'd apparently learned in 4 years of managing international projects. Compartmentalize the emotion, focus on the objective, find the target, execute. 3 days later, I was walking Noah home from his daycare program when I saw a man standing on the sidewalk in front of Agnes's boarding house, and I recognized his silhouette before I recognized his face, because some things your body remembers, even when your mind has learned to forget them. 3 days after Oliver told Adrian everything in that coffee shop, I was walking Noah home from his daycare program on a Thursday afternoon in September. I saw him before I recognized him, just a man's silhouette standing on the sidewalk in front of Agnes's boarding house, and my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet, because my hands went cold and my feet stopped moving, and Noah tugged my arm asking why we'd stopped walking. And that's when the man turned and I saw Adrian Vale's face for the first time in 4 years. He'd been waiting there for 40 minutes. I learned that later. He'd found the address through the Resource Center volunteer coordinator had been standing on Elm Street, trying to figure out which house was mine, and then he'd seen us coming down the sidewalk. He saw Noah first. Curly dark hair, square jawline. The way he walked that specific gait that Adrian recognized immediately as his own from childhood photos. He didn't need a DNA test. He didn't need confirmation. His body knew before his brain caught up. We stood there. 10 seconds of complete silence, both frozen. Noah looked up at the strange man, then at me, then back at the man. "Mama," Noah said. "Why did we stop? Who's that man?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Oliver had told me he was coming. I'd spent the whole night preparing words, rehearsing what I'd say when this moment arrived. And now that he was standing here in front of me, every prepared sentence dissolved, and all I had left was 4 years of grief and exhaustion happening all at once in my chest. Adrian took a step forward, stopped. His voice broke when he spoke. "Saskia, Oliver told me. I didn't know. I never saw your emails. I never..." Tears on my face. I didn't realize until Noah said it. "Who are you that Mom is crying?" Noah's voice was louder now, worried. He'd never seen me cry like this. Not in front of him. If you've ever seen someone you thought you'd lost forever standing on a sidewalk like they'd just walked out of your memory and into your afternoon, you know it doesn't feel like the movies. It feels like your heart is trying to beat backwards. Like time is a thing that can break and mend simultaneously. "Though this is..." I started, stopped, looked at Noah. "This is an old friend, baby. Can you go inside and tell Grandma Agnes we're home? I'll be right there." Noah looked uncertain, but he went. I watched him climb the porch steps. Go inside, door closing behind him. Then I turned to Adrian. "You came back," I said. 3 days ago, I found the emails, all 47 of them. They were archived, hidden. I never saw them, Saskia. I never knew you were trying to reach me." "I know," I said. He stopped. "You know, Oliver came to see me yesterday. Told me everything. The folder. The calls. The assistant lying to both of us. He wanted to make sure I heard it from him before you showed up." Adrian's hands were shaking. "I didn't know about him. About Noah. I believe you. You do." Oliver showed me proof. The timeline. The intercepted calls. "I believe you were forced to leave. I believe you didn't know." Relief flooded his face. Then something else. Hope. "But," I continued, and watched that hope fracture. "Believing you were manipulated doesn't erase what happened to me. I need you to understand that." 2 weeks later, we met at the park near the boarding house, Saturday afternoon. Noah played on the slide nearby, close enough that I could see him, but far enough that he couldn't hear us. Adrian explained everything systematically. The financial contract, the monitored phone, the assistant who'd answered my calls and told him I didn't want to listen, finding the emails 3 days after returning to America. I listened without interrupting, let him finish. Then I said what I'd been preparing to say for 2 weeks. "I believe you were forced to leave. I believe your parents manipulated both of us. But I need you to understand something." Adrian nodded. "Before I tell you my response, are you still here?" Comment A if I should have forgiven him right away, Or B, if I was right to demand he earn it and add why in 5 to 10 words. Note what follows includes dramatized details for impact, but the message is real. I gave birth alone in that hospital, I said. Patrice was there, but you weren't. My parents weren't. I held Noah for the first time with no family in the room. I knocked on Vale Holdings' door with a 3-month-old baby in a stroller and got turned away by security. 3 days later, your father's lawyers sent me a letter threatening harassment charges if I ever approached again. Adrian's face went white. I don't owe you quick forgiveness just because you finally know the truth, I continued. I can't forget what those 4 years cost me. What they cost Noah. He didn't argue, didn't make excuses. I know, he said quietly. I didn't come asking for forgiveness. I came to be the father I should have been from the beginning, however long that takes. Whatever that looks like. I came to do what's right. The strongest thing you can do when someone comes back asking for forgiveness isn't to give it immediately. It's to make them understand that forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone just because they finally learned to tell the difference between truth and the lies they were told. We sat there watching Noah play. He went down the slide, climbed back up, went down again. Does he know who I am? Adrian asked. No. I told him you're an old friend who's going to be around more. I'm not putting labels on this until we figure out what this is. Adrian nodded, watched Noah climb again. Adrian sat on that park bench watching Noah climb the slide for the 7th time, curly hair catching October sunlight, small hands gripping metal rails, and I watched Adrian's face do something I hadn't expected. It crumpled, not with grief, but with the specific pain of someone calculating how many moments like this he'd already missed and could never get back. The child didn't know who the man sitting near his mother was. That was the detail I saw register on Adrian's face. Not that I'd kept Noah from him, but that 4 years had been stolen from both of them, and no amount of explanation could ever return what was gone. 3 days after that park conversation, Adrian did something that changed the equation entirely. He called his parents and told them he knew everything and that they were going to meet their grandson whether they wanted to or not. Adrian called his parents 3 days after our park conversation. I didn't know until the town car pulled up. Adrian's parents arrived at the park in a town car, and I realized he didn't just bring his parents to meet Noah. He staged this meeting in public so I couldn't say no. Victor Vale, 65, had run Vale Holdings for 30 years and believed every problem had a financial solution. He stepped out wearing an expensive suit. Evelyn Vale, 60, sat on 4 charity boards and had the kind of elegant presence that came from decades of knowing which fork to use. When she saw Noah, her expression showed instant unguarded warmth. Noah was on the swings. Adrian stood next to me. You ambushed me, I said quietly. I knew you'd say no if I asked, Adrian said. But they needed to meet him. Victor and Evelyn approached. Noah jumped off the swing mid-arc, landed badly, laughed. Evelyn's hand went to her chest, that instinctive gesture when a child almost hurts themselves. Mom, Dad, Adrian said. This is Saskia, and this is Noah. Victor's eyes went to Noah. Stayed there. Curly dark hair, square jawline, the Vale family chin. Hello, Noah, Evelyn said, crouching to his level. I'm your grandmother, Evelyn. This is your grandfather, Victor. Noah looked at me. I nodded. Hi, Noah said. It's nice to meet you. Evelyn's eyes filled. A vendor 20 feet away sold toys and balloons. Evelyn looked at Noah, then at me for permission. May I? You don't have to. I'd like to, please. She bought a remote-controlled car that probably cost more than I made in a week. Noah's eyes went wide, but he didn't reach for it. He looked at me. Mom, can I keep this? 4 years of teaching him we had to be careful that permission mattered, all visible in one question. Victor was watching. Something shifted in his expression. Yes, baby, I said. You can keep it. Thank you, Grandma, Noah said carefully. Grandma, Evelyn repeated softly. Yes, I'm your grandma. We stayed an hour. Noah played. Evelyn watched him like she was memorizing every movement. Victor stood apart, observing. Later, a vendor came by with expensive helicopters. Evelyn reached for her purse. Noah looked at the helicopter, looked at the car he was holding, looked at Evelyn. "That's too much, Grandma," he said. Everything stopped. Evelyn froze. Victor turned fully toward us. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Evelyn asked. "That's too much. I already got the car. That's enough." He said it naturally, just the truth as he understood it. I'd taught him that in our boarding house room, where I counted dollars and made every purchase matter. Victor was still watching, not Noah, me, what Adrian told me weeks later. That afternoon, Victor went to his private office. Opened the file he'd commissioned 6 weeks earlier, shortly after Adrian had confronted him about the archived emails and told him he intended to find me and be present in Noah's life, whatever that required. Private investigation. 4 years of my life documented by someone I'd never met. The investigator had been thorough. Proof I'd refused all government assistance after Noah was born. Worked night shifts instead. Documentation showing I'd repaid Agnes Brennan every penny over 2 years. Never missed a payment. Evidence I never contacted Adrian after receiving the legal warning. Complete silence after that letter. And testimony from neighbors Tom Kowalski, others from the resource center that I never spoke ill of Adrian to Noah. Never painted him as a villain. "What did she tell the child?" Victor had asked. The investigator checked his notes. She told him his father was working far away and couldn't visit. No details. No blame. Victor had commissioned the investigation to find weaknesses, points of leverage for custody discussions. Instead, the file proved I'd survived 4 years without his money-raised Adrian's son with dignity and never used that child as a weapon. "You're certain she never attempted contact?" Victor asked. "After the legal warning, Mr. Vale, she acted like your son died. Complete severance. Not a single attempt after that letter." Victor's hand tightened on the file. Adrian told me his father closed that file and didn't open it again. Something in Victor Vale's assessment fundamentally shifted. I didn't know this that November afternoon. I just knew Victor's expression had changed when Noah said, "That's too much." And Evelyn kept looking at me with something like respect. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. Saskia, this is Evelyn Vale." Her voice was warm. "I wanted to thank you for today, for letting us meet Noah. He's Adrian's son too," I said. "He deserves to know his family. We would like to invite you both to Thanksgiving dinner, at our home, if you're comfortable with that." Their home, the Vale estate. The family that had sent me a legal threat 4 years ago was inviting me to Thanksgiving dinner. "I'll think about it," I said. "Of course, no pressure. But Saskia," she paused, "you've done a beautiful job raising him. I wanted you to know that." After I hung up, I stood in Agnes's kitchen holding my phone and realizing that the war I'd been preparing to fight might be turning into something else entirely. The war I'd been preparing to fight was turning into something else. I accepted Evelyn's Thanksgiving invitation, but 3 days before that dinner, something reminded me the war had just changed battlefields. My father stands at the microphone praising the Vale Corporation's vision for our neighborhood, and he has no idea he's applauding the family that threatened to bury me 4 years ago. Brookhaven Community Hall, late November. Vale Holdings announcing their redevelopment project. Harold Mercer at the podium. Community Board President. Voice of authority. Vale Holdings has proven their commitment to responsible urban renewal across 3 states, Harold said. "We're fortunate to have partners who understand community values." Claire stood on stage as MC, red dress, microphone, center of attention. "We're excited about the opportunities this brings to Brookhaven," Claire said, with her practiced smile. I sat in the back row. Adrian 3 rows ahead with Victor. My parents hadn't looked back far enough to see me. Victor stood when Claire introduced him, walked to the podium, shook Harold's hand. If they knew Victor Vale bought a background check on their daughter, would Dad still be shaking his hand? If they knew I'd eaten Thanksgiving dinner at the Vale estate 2 days ago. The irony was suffocating. Harold and Claire praising Victor Vale. Victor nodding politely. Adrian catching my eye expression saying he saw it too. My parents applauding the man who'd investigated me threatened me, then invited me to his home when he realized I wasn't the problem he'd expected. 2 weeks later, at the Community Resource Center, the official displacement list arrived. 47 families, 47 addresses in the demolition zone. I started reading. Tom Kowalski, line 8, Mrs. Rodriguez, line 10, line 12. I stopped reading at line 12. Read it again. Agnes Brennan. The woman who didn't ask questions when I showed up pregnant and broke. Brennan Agnes, 412 Maple Street, 30-year occupancy, relocation assistance standard. The house where she'd taken me in, where Noah had spent his first year. Demolition zone. Agnes walked in 20 minutes later. She'd gotten her notice. I raised 3 children in that house, Saskia, she said. Her voice steady, but her hands weren't. Where do they think standard assistant sends a woman my age? I looked at the wall. The note I'd taped there 2 years ago. Community Development Fund one day. Not one day, now. They don't think about it, I said. That's why I'm going to make them. I opened my laptop. Started typing. Resident protection proposal. 3 scenarios using Vale's revenue projections. Displacement mitigation strategies. Housing rights under state law. Everything I'd learned for 4 years went into this document. 1 week later, I sat in Vale Holdings with my proposal printed and bound. Victor at the head of the table. Adrian to his right. Project team filling other chairs. I presented for 20 minutes, walked them through each scenario. Victor read the entire document, turned each page, nodded at certain sections. Then he set it down. Miss Mercer, Victor said, polite, almost kind. Your proposal shows care, but urban redevelopment requires seasoned financial modeling. With respect, Mr. Vale, I said, I've modeled 3 scenarios using your own revenue projections. I see that. Impressive work for someone still completing their degree. He smiled, not unkindly. But we've retained Morrison Consulting for community liaison. 30 years of experience in projects this size. Victor closed my proposal without reading the appendix. The appendix had the names. Morrison will handle resident relations, Victor continued. They'll address these concerns with appropriate expertise, but thank you for your interest. Adrian was watching me, waiting to see if I'd argue. I gathered my documents, stood. Thank you for your time, I said. Adrian followed me to the hallway. Let me talk to him, Adrian said quietly. I can convince him to... I shook my head. Wait. Wait for what? For Morrison to fail. I adjusted my folder. Your father hired a consultant who will walk into that community with beautiful slides and zero connection to the people whose homes he's planning to demolish. They won't trust him because he doesn't know them. When Morrison fails, they'll remember I knew their names. Adrian studied me. You're not fighting this. You're playing it. I'm being strategic, I said. There's a difference. That night, back in my apartment, the new one I could finally afford, I filed Victor's rejection. Not in the trash, in a folder. Labeled Phase 2 with black marker. Because there had been a Phase 1. Surviving. Getting my degree. Building that database of 47 cases. Earning residents' trust. Phase 2 was waiting for Morrison to prove he didn't know what I knew. I looked at my proposal before filing it. I hadn't told Victor everything. I'd been careful. I didn't tell him I knew Mrs. Navarro Child at Unit 14, that I'd helped her with residency paperwork, that she trusted me. I didn't tell him Tom Kowalski had lent me his umbrella on the worst day of my life, that he remembered, that he'd told half the neighborhood. I didn't mention the relationships I'd been mapping for 4 years, the connections Morrison would never see, because he'd walk in with slides and 30 years of experience with people he'd never met. Back in my apartment, I filed Victor's rejection in a folder marked Phase 2. I didn't tell Victor I knew Mrs. Ningyen's child at Unit 14, that Mr. Kowalski lent me his umbrella on the worst day of my life, that I've been mapping this neighborhood's relationships for 4 years. I kept it all. I'm waiting for the right moment. When Victor's consultant fails, the residents will only trust one person. It'll be me. I didn't have to wait long for Morrison to fail. The Morrison Consulting presenter has been talking for 40 minutes with perfect slides and zero trust, and I can see Mr. Kowalski 3 rows ahead shifting in his seat the way people do before they walk out. Brookhaven Community Hall. Full capacity. Early December, 1 week before Vale's project ceremony. Derek Morrison stood at the podium. Morrison Consulting representative hired by Vale Holdings for community liaison. Polished presenter who lacked local connection or resident knowledge. Navy suit, expensive watch, slides that probably cost more to design than most people in this room made in a month. Vale Holdings is offering 127% of assessed value, Derek said, with relocation assistance packages detailed in Section 4B of the handout you received. Silence. Not the good kind. The kind where people are deciding whether to leave or stay long enough to be polite. Derek clicked to the next slide. Financial tables, compensation tiers, everything color-coded and professionally designed. We understand this is a significant transition, Derek continued. That's why we've structured our offer to exceed market standards across all comparable metropolitan development projects in the Southeast region. More silence. The failure wasn't about competence. Derek knew his numbers. His slides were perfect. But residents could smell outsider status, and 40 minutes of perfect presentations couldn't substitute for knowing a single resident's name. Tom Kowalski raised his hand. Yes, sir, Derek said. Questions are welcome. How long have you lived here, sir? Tom asked. In Brookhaven. Derek paused. I'm here representing Morrison Consulting's Community Liaison Division. That's not what I asked, Tom said. He stood up, started putting on his coat. Sir, if you'll let me finish explaining the compensation structure. I've heard enough, Tom said. Others started standing. Agnes Brennan gathered her purse. Mrs. Rodriguez reached for her jacket. James Riley sat in the back corner. Vale Holdings company observer, mid-level project manager who reported directly to Adrian. He was watching the room empty with growing alarm. I watched Agnes start gathering her coat. The right moment had arrived. I stood. Excuse me, I said, loud enough to carry. May I have 10 minutes? Derek looked at me. Then at James Riley. James nodded. 10 minutes, Derek said. He looked relieved to step away from the podium. I walked to the front. No laptop, no slides. Just me and 47 families I'd been working with for years. My name is Saskia Mercer, I said. I'm not with Vale Holdings. I'm not with Morrison Consulting. I live 3 blocks from here on Elm Street, and I've been volunteering at the Resource Center for the past 2 years. People who'd been halfway to the door stopped. I know most of you, I continued. Some of you I've helped with housing paperwork. Some of you I see at the Resource Center. Some of you I just know from the neighborhood. And I want to talk about what Derek's presentation didn't cover, the specific rights and options each of you has under state law. I looked at the list I'd memorized. Didn't need to check notes. Mrs. Angyen, Unit 14. You'll need I-751 residency documentation for your relocation claim. I have the form. It takes 6 weeks to process, so we need to start now. Mrs. Angyen sat back down. Mr. Kowalski, you've lived at your address for 23 years. Under Georgia's Landlord-Tenant Act and the City of Atlanta's Anti-Displacement Ordinance, long-term residents in federally assisted housing qualify for extended relocation assistance and the right of first refusal on comparable units in the new development. Derek's presentation didn't mention that because most consultants don't look past the state minimums. But I do. Tom stopped putting on his coat. Agnes Brennan, you've lived on Maple Street for 30 years. You qualify for long-term resident housing assistance. The state provides additional relocation funds for tenants over 65 with occupancy longer than 20 years. That's separate from Vale's offer. You get both. Agnes looked at me, set her purse back down. I went through 15 families, 15 names, specific situations, specific solutions. No slides, no tables. Just the information they actually needed from someone who knew them by name. Agnes smiled at me from the 3rd row. She'd been waiting 4 years to see this. James Riley had his phone out. typing fast. Then he made a call. Whispered into the phone where I could almost hear him. Adrian, she knows everything, every family, no notes. Tom Kowalski stood again. Not to leave this time. You're the only one who knows who we are, he said, looking at me then at Derek. This man's been talking for 40 minutes about compensation packages and market standards. You just told me I have rights he didn't mention. Why should we trust him over you, sir? You shouldn't, I said. You should verify everything I said. Check the statutes. Read the forms. I brought copies. I held up the folder I'd brought. 47 printed information sheets. One for each family. Because here's what Derek can give you, Vale Holdings money. Here's what I can give you, the knowledge to make sure you're getting everything you're legally entitled to. You need both. But you need to know your rights first before you negotiate with anyone's money. The room was completely silent now, but it was a different silence, the kind where people are listening instead of leaving. James ended his call, looked at me with an expression I recognized from 4 years of watching people realize I knew more than they'd expected. Derek Morrison stood off to the side. He wasn't angry, just outclassed. He'd come in with 30 years of consulting experience and perfect slides. I'd come in with 4 years of living 3 blocks away and knowing whose umbrella had kept me dry when I had nowhere else to go. The Vale Observer closed his phone and looked at me with new calculation. I'd just solved his community crisis in 10 minutes without notes, and now he understood what Victor didn't. I wasn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. I'd just proven they couldn't build without me. Victor must now negotiate with the woman he dismissed, and I held all the leverage. I didn't know Claire had seen Adrian's name on the Vale Project email until 2 weeks later. The email had listed me as Community Liaison Routine Project Correspondence, but it arrived the same week Adrian had politely declined Claire's invitation to dinner. She'd suggested a new restaurant downtown, called it Networking. Her smile had been the kind that expected more than professional conversation. Adrian told me later he'd kept his response kind. He'd mentioned being focused on rebuilding his relationship with me, and Noah thanked her for understanding. Claire had said, of course, no problem, but her hand had gripped her phone hard enough to leave marks. 3 days after that rejection, Claire walked into the Brookhaven Chronicle offices and asked for Lucas Hayes. Lucas Hayes was the local reporter who'd been covering the Vale Holdings redevelopment for 6 months. 32 wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of journalist who fact-checked everything twice. He'd written careful pieces about zoning changes and architectural plans, the kind of journalism that informed without inflaming. Claire had read his work. She knew he was looking for a human angle. "I have a story for you," Claire said, sliding into the chair across from his desk. "About the Vale project." Lucas looked up from his laptop. "I'm listening." Adrian Vale has a 4-year-old son he abandoned," Claire said. The words came out smooth practiced. "The baby's mother is my sister. She's been living in this neighborhood the whole time. 4 years in a boarding house while his family threatened her with legal action. And now Vale Holdings just hired her as their community advisor." Lucas's pen stopped moving. "That's complicated." "That's a scandal," Claire said. "You're welcome." I learned about Claire's coffee meeting with Lucas 3 days later, when I read the headline. The article appeared on Thursday morning, 3 days before the project announcement ceremony. Agnes brought the newspaper to my door at 7 a.m., already folded to page 3. "You're going to want to see this," she said. The headline read, "The woman who lived here 4 years may be why Vale Holdings isn't tearing it down." I read it standing in my doorway while Noah ate cereal at the kitchen table. Lucas Hayes had written a profile, not a scandal piece, a celebration. He'd described my resident protection proposal in detail, my urban planning degree completed, while raising Noah alone, my relationships with every family on the displacement list. He'd quoted Tom Kowalski calling me the person who actually knows what we need. He'd mentioned Vale Holdings' decision to restructure their project around community preservation, crediting my work with influencing corporate policy. The article mentioned nothing about Adrian and me, Nothing about abandonment or blocked communication or 4 years of silence. It acknowledged I had a young son, noted Vale Holdings' commitment to family-friendly development, and moved on. Claire had given Lucas a scandal. He'd written a hero story. I stood there reading it 3 times while Agnes watched me with her arms crossed and her smile growing. "I told you that girl was going places," she said to no one in particular. The whole neighborhood read it. Mrs. Garza from the corner market called it inspiration. Tom Kowalski texted me a photo of the article taped to his refrigerator. Patrice showed up at my door with coffee and tears in her eyes. My father read the article aloud at breakfast, while Claire sat frozen across from him watching her sabotage become my coronation. Mercer spent 4 years mapping neighborhood relationships while completing her urban planning degree. Harold read his voice, carrying that particular tone he used for accomplishments he approved of. Her resident protection proposal demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both community needs and corporate feasibility. Claire's coffee cup stayed suspended halfway to her mouth. She'd given Lucas everything: the abandonment, the boarding house, the 4 years of silence, the baby. She'd handed him drama and betrayal and family wounds. He'd written about my work instead. "Says here she's being recognized as a model for community-engaged development," Harold continued. "That Vale Holdings is citing her approach in investor presentations. That's quite something." Claire set down her cup carefully, the porcelain clicking against the saucer too loud in the quiet kitchen. Marion's hand had gone still on her napkin, that threefold ritual forgotten. Across town, Adrian's parents read the article over breakfast. Victor called Adrian to ask why he hadn't mentioned I was being profiled in the paper. Evelyn texted me congratulations with 3 heart emojis. At the hospital where I'd given birth alone, Patrice's colleagues passed around the newspaper and said they'd known me when. At the community center, residents brought multiple copies, each one folded to page 3. Claire texted me that night, first message in 4 years. I didn't mean to. 4 words. No explanation of what she'd meant to do instead. No acknowledgement of what she'd actually done. Just those 4 words sitting on my phone screen while I stood in my kitchen holding Lucas Hayes's article in my other hand. I looked at those 4 words, then at the article framed on my laptop screen. Tomorrow was the announcement ceremony, and thanks to my sister's rage, the whole city would be watching. My mother walked toward me across the community plaza with her practiced smile, and my 4-year-old son looked up at the stranger and asked me, "Mom, who is this woman?" Marion Mercer, 54, silver hair arranged in perfect waves, the kind of woman whose entire life was calibrated for social approval, stopped 3 feet away. Her smile held. Her hand extended toward Noah froze halfway. "This is your grandmother," I said. The words came out flat, factual. I didn't add warmth. I didn't add anger. I just named the relationship Noah had never known existed. Noah looked at her the way he looked at any adult I introduced, polite, waiting for me to signal whether this person was safe. He didn't reach for her hand. He pressed closer to my leg. Marion's smile cracked. Not dramatically. Just a small falter at the corners, the kind only someone who'd watched that smile their whole life would recognize. She turned to my father, standing 3 steps behind her, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. "He doesn't know us." Harold Mercer stood in his Sunday suit, the gray one he wore to church board meetings, holding the newspaper I'd seen him read yesterday morning at breakfast. Lucas Hayes's article about my work, my degree, my 3 years mapping this neighborhood family by family. The article that had made my father say, "Quite something," while Claire sat frozen across from him. "We should find seats," Harold said. They walked past me toward the rows of white chairs arranged in front of the temporary stage. Marion kept her practiced posture, her social grace intact, for the 300 witnesses watching. But her hand stayed where Noah hadn't taken it, held against her chest like she was protecting something that hurt. Claire stood alone near the back corner, no longer the center of family attention she'd occupied her entire life. Our eyes met for half a second. She looked away first. Adrian took the stage at 10 a.m. exactly. He wore the charcoal suit I'd seen him wear to Vale Holdings board meetings, but his tie was different navy instead of his usual gray. He'd told me last night it was his father's from the day Victor had signed the company's first major development contract. "Thank you for coming," Adrian said. His voice carried across the plaza without amplification, the kind of projection that came from years of boardroom presentations. 4 months ago, Vale Holdings came to this neighborhood with a standard redevelopment plan, efficient, profitable, and completely wrong. Victor sat in the front row next to Evelyn. I watched his eyebrows rise, the only visible reaction he ever gave when surprised. "We were wrong," Adrian continued, "because we designed a project for a neighborhood without understanding the neighborhood. We counted buildings, not families. We measured property values, not community bonds." He paused, turned slightly toward where I stood at the side of the stage. "Our community advisor, Saskia Mercer, spent 3 years mapping 200 family relationships in this neighborhood, without compensation, without recognition, without anyone asking her to do it. She did it because she lived here. Because she understood what we didn't, that development without preservation isn't progress. It's erasure." Adrian said my name. Not Noah's mother, not the woman I abandoned. My name with my title before 300 witnesses. I stood there hearing my professional credentials spoken aloud by Adrian Vale in front of his father, my father, and every resident I'd worked with for 3 years. Agnes smiled from the third row. Tom Kowalski nodded. Mrs. Chen held up her phone recording. Adrian kept talking, describing the revised project preservation zones, affordable units, community ownership structures. But I was watching my parents. Harold sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap over the newspaper. Marion's practiced posture stayed intact, but her three-fold napkin ritual had started without her realizing it, folding the ceremony program once, twice, 3 times. The ritual that meant she'd made a decision she couldn't take back. Victor leaned toward Evelyn and said something I couldn't hear from the stage. Evelyn's hand covered his, squeezed once. Later, Adrian told me what his father had said. "She earned this platform. My father taught me business." Adrian said, his voice shifting to something quieter, more personal. He looked directly at Victor. "He taught me contracts and leverage and how to read a balance sheet. Those are important skills. I'm grateful for them." He turned back to the audience. "But Saskia taught me what community actually means. That it's not something you develop for people. It's something you protect with them." The applause started from the back rows, residents, not investors. Agnes stood first. Then Tom. Then the whole third row. Then the fourth. By the time the applause reached my parents in row 7, they had no choice but to stand with everyone else. Adrian stepped back from the microphone. The ceremony shifted to technical presentations, zoning details, timeline projections, architectural renderings. I stopped listening. I heard my father's voice carrying across 15 rows. "We were wrong." Not whispered, not private. Loud enough that the presentation paused. Heads turned. Harold Mercer, the man who'd spent 4 years telling people his daughter was working in Charlotte and keeping in touch, making that statement before the community he'd feared judging him. "Harold not here." Marion's voice quieter, trying to pull him back to practice discretion. "Especially here," Harold said. His voice stayed level, deliberate. "About all of it. She didn't need us. We needed to be the kind of people who didn't abandon her." 300 witnesses. Agnes 2 rows ahead, turning to look. Victor in the front row, still watching the stage but listening. Claire in the back corner, frozen. Noah beside me on stage, holding my hand, too young to understand, but old enough to feel my grip tighten. I stood on that stage hearing my father's admission float through 300 witnesses, and I did nothing. Didn't step toward him, didn't step away. I let that statement remain in the air without me doing anything to it. That was my answer. The ceremony ended with handshakes and technical discussions about zoning permits. I walked Noah to Agnes's car without looking back at my parents. They didn't follow. Claire called me 7 days after our father said we were wrong in front of 300 people, and I almost didn't answer. Her name appeared on my phone screen at 9 p.m. on a Thursday. I stared at it through 3 rings before picking up. "I'd like to talk," Claire said. Not hello, not how are you, just the request delivered like she was scheduling a dental appointment. Okay. Tomorrow, the cafe on Main Street, 10 a.m. I agreed because saying no felt like giving her something, my anger, my energy, my attention beyond what the conversation deserved. Saying yes was easier. Saying yes meant I could close the door myself instead of leaving it open. Claire arrived at the cafe at 10:03 wearing the navy blazer she wore to professional events. She'd prepared for this meeting the way she prepared for presentations, outfit chosen, talking points rehearsed. She ordered coffee, sat across from me, and folded her hands on the table. "I didn't know Lucas would take it that direction," she said. "I just thought—" She stopped, realizing she'd started with explanation instead of apology. The entry twist sat there between us. Claire had come to clarify a misunderstanding, not acknowledge abandonment. She still believed the newspaper article was the problem, not the 4 years before it. I watched her recalibrate, searching for different words. I didn't help her find them. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." She tried again. "I was angry and I made a bad decision, and I'm sorry the article created complications. Sorry the article created complications, not sorry for weaponizing my life. Sorry for the outcome she hadn't predicted." "Did you know I lived nearby during those 4 years?" I asked. My voice stayed level, curious. "That you could have visited—" Claire's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully, the porcelain clicking against the saucer. "Mom said you needed space," she said. "That reaching out would make things harder for you." "Did you believe that?" Claire's silence lasted 4 seconds. That was my answer. I stood up. I pulled a $10 bill from my wallet, enough to cover both coffees, and placed it on the table between us. "Thank you for coming," I said. The words were polite, final. Not forgiveness, not condemnation. Just a door closing with the quiet click of someone who didn't need to slam it to make it stay shut. I walked out while Claire sat there with her rehearsed talking points still undelivered and her coffee getting cold. Victor called me 10 days after the ceremony. Not his assistant. Victor himself, asking if I could come to his office that afternoon to discuss project logistics. I arrived at Vale Holdings at 2 p.m., the same building where I'd been turned away by security 4 years ago, Dennis Crawford telling me I wasn't on the approved visitor list. The same lobby where I'd stood with Noah in his stroller, believing if I could just explain to Adrian's parents that their grandson existed, everything would change. This time, the receptionist smiled and said Victor was expecting me. This time, I took the elevator to the executive floor. This time, I walked into Victor Vale's corner office as someone he'd invited. Victor stood when I entered, the kind of old-fashioned courtesy I'd seen him extend to board members and investors. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I'd like to formalize your role as Community Liaison Director. Salary, benefits, full authority over resident relations for the Brookhaven project. We can have contracts drawn up by end of week." He named a salary that was more than I'd made in the past 4 years combined. He described benefits that included healthcare for Noah. He outlined responsibilities that matched exactly what I'd been doing unpaid for 3 years. I listened to the entire offer without interrupting. When he finished, I met his eyes. "I'll participate if the resident protection proposal is in the official contract," I said. Not a verbal promise, not a memorandum of understanding. The legal document that governs this project needs to include the preservation zones, displacement protections, and community ownership structures I outlined in September, with specific addresses and family names. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying me the way I'd seen him study acquisition proposals, looking for weakness, testing for leverage. Victor smiled. Not the polite corporate smile, something real. "Okay," he said. The word came out quiet, almost amused. "I understand why my son isn't giving up." I didn't respond to the personal comment. I'd learned 4 years ago that responding to personal comments from Victor Vale was walking into territory I couldn't control. I stayed in business. "I'll need 48 hours to review the contract language before I sign," I said. Victor nodded. He pressed the intercom button on his desk and asked his assistant to bring in the Brookhaven Development Contract current draft, with resident protection addendum attached. The assistant arrived 3 minutes later with a document that was already prepared. Victor had known what I'd ask for. He'd already added it. I read every page while Victor answered emails on his laptop, giving me space to verify without rushing. The preservation zones were there. Agnes Brennan's address on the protected list, line 3. Tom Kowalski's building designated for renovation, not demolition. Mrs. Garza's corner market property excluded from commercial rezoning. 200 families named and protected in legal language that couldn't be revised without community approval. I signed. Victor signed. His assistant witnessed. I left with a photocopy of every page folded in my bag next to the Excel spreadsheet I'd been building for 3 years. I walked out of Victor Vale's office with a signed contract protecting Agnes Brennan's house and 200 families. I signed. Victor signed. Agnes won't lose her house. That's enough. I took the contract home and filed it in the drawer where I'd kept Noah's birth certificate for 4 years, documents that proved what mattered, protected what I'd built. My mother arrived at the park 3 weeks after the ceremony with empty hands and no prepared speech, and that scared me more than her rehearsed smiles ever did. I was sitting on the bench where I'd sat hundreds of afternoons watching Noah play late December sun, turning everything golden and cold. Marian walked across the grass in her winter coat, the good wool one she wore to church, and sat down beside me without asking if the spot was taken. She didn't bring a casserole dish, didn't bring a gift for Noah, didn't arrive with the practiced smile she'd worn at the ceremony or the threefold napkin ritual that signaled decisions already made. She just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, watching Noah climb the slide 15 feet away. We sat in silence for 3 minutes. I counted. "I don't know what to say," Marian finally said. The entry twist landed quiet. My mother, who'd always known exactly what to say in every social situation, who'd taught Sunday school lessons on grace and hosted charity dinners with perfect speeches admitting she had no words prepared. Raw vulnerability instead of performance. "Then don't say anything, right?" I said. "Just tell the truth." Marian's hands tightened in her lap. She watched Noah reach the top of the slide wave at me slide down, laughing. "He looks so much like his father," she said. Yes. That was all I gave her. Not agreement packaged with forgiveness. Not elaboration to make the moment easier. Just the truth she'd asked for returned in the same bare form. "I told myself we were protecting you," Marian said. Her voice stayed level, factual. "That making you choose would be cruel, that you needed to focus on your future without the burden of—" She stopped. Even now she couldn't say the baby or your son or Noah. The word got stuck somewhere between admission and excuse. "I was 22, I said. I needed my mother." Marian's breath caught. Not dramatic, just a small hitch that meant the truth had landed where it needed to. "Yes," she said. We sat until the streetlights came on. My mother stayed. That was enough for one day. Noah ran over when the park lights flickered to life, his cheeks red from cold and running. He looked at Marian with the polite curiosity he showed all adults. I sat with not recognition, but not fear either. "This is your grandmother," I said. Same words I'd used at the ceremony, same flat tone. "Her name is Marian." "Hi," Noah said. Then to me, "Can we go to Dad's?" He said he'd read the Caterpillar book. The word landed so naturally I almost missed it. Dad. Not Adrian. Not the man, or your father, or any of the careful phrases I'd been using for 3 months. Just Dad, spoken like he'd been saying it his whole life. Marian heard it too. Her hands tightened again, but she didn't ask. Didn't correct. Didn't insert herself into the moment with questions about when this had started or what it meant. We can go, I said. Marion stood when I did. Thank you for letting me sit, she said. Not letting me see Noah or giving me a chance. Just sitting. The smallest possible thing to thank me for, which somehow made it more real than grand gestures would have been. I drove Noah to Adrian's apartment 20 minutes later. Same building where Adrian had lived when we met, different unit. He'd moved to a 2-bedroom in October, set up the second room with a bed and books, and the dinosaur lamp Noah had picked out himself. I knocked at 6:30. Adrian opened the door with flour on his shirt. He'd been teaching himself to bake, producing increasingly edible cookies every week. Come in, he said. I made dinner. Well, I made pasta and burned garlic bread. But the pasta's fine. I'm just picking him up, I said. Stay, Adrian said, not pressuring, just offering. There's enough. Noah was already at the table coloring on the placemat Adrian kept for him. I stayed because leaving felt more complicated than sitting down for pasta. We ate while Noah narrated his park adventures, the slide, the swings, the dog that had licked his hand. Adrian listened with the complete attention I'd watched him give to board presentations, asking follow-up questions about the dog's name and whether the swings went high enough. After dinner, Adrian picked up a book from the shelf, the same worn copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I'd read to Noah alone for 3 years, the one I'd bought at a used bookstore when Noah was 6 months old. Story time, Adrian said. Noah climbed onto the couch, settled against Adrian's shoulder with heavy eyes. I stood to leave. Give them space. Let Adrian have this time without me observing. But I stopped at the doorway, just for a minute, just to see. Noah said, Dad. Just like that. Like he'd been saying it his whole life. Dad, keep reading. Adrian's voice didn't pause, didn't react to the title like it was new or uncertain. He just kept reading, his voice soft and steady. The caterpillar ate through one nice green leaf, and after that he felt much better. I stood in that doorway unseen for 5 minutes, watching Adrian read the book I'd memorized, watching Noah lean into his father's shoulder, the same way he leaned into mine at bedtime. The warmest moment in 4 years of cold nights. Not victory, not vindication. Just this, my son secure enough to give his trust, his father steady enough to hold it. I leaned against the doorframe, listening to Adrian read the same book I'd read alone for 3 years. Noah said Dad, without hesitation, without asking permission. Those lonely nights weren't failures, they were foundations. This is what I built. That night I stayed at Adrian's apartment until Noah fell asleep. Then I drove home to the 1-bedroom I still rented, the place where I'd built everything alone before I had help. The email subject line read, Official Offer, Director, Regional Community Development Fund, and I stared at the word Director for 30 seconds before opening it. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd studied for urban planning exams, while Noah napped in the next room, when the notification appeared on my laptop. 2 a.m. I'd been reviewing zoning documents for a project meeting, drinking cold coffee, trying not to think about how naturally Noah had said Dad 6 hours earlier. I click the email. Dear Ms. Mercer, on behalf of the Regional Community Development Fund Board of Directors, I am pleased to offer you the position of Fund Director, effective January 15th, 2025. I read the next paragraph twice. The RCDF operates as an independent regional nonprofit with community-led governance structure. While Vale Holdings has provided seed funding, the fund maintains full operational independence and fiduciary responsibility to community stakeholders, not corporate donors. The entry twist landed quiet but complete. This wasn't Victor's gift. This wasn't Adrian's family offering me a position to keep me close. This was a board of directors, people I'd never met hiring me, because 3 years of unpaid work had proven I could do the job. Salary $78,000 annually. Benefits including healthcare. Start date in 3 weeks. I looked up from the laptop screen. The note was still there, taped to the wall above my makeshift desk, the corner where I'd set up my workspace 2.5 years ago. Yellow paper, my handwriting, in black ink. Community Development Fund, one day. I'd written that note in March 2022 on Noah's first birthday, 6 months into tracking resident cases in my Excel spreadsheet. I'd written it when I thought I'd never be anything but tired, when one day felt like a dream instead of a plan. I typed my response. I accept the position. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to beginning work in January. I pressed send at 2:17 a.m., then sat staring at the note on the wall until the coffee went from cold to room temperature. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in late December, Noah asked what to eat. And I made pancakes in our new apartment kitchen, the 2-bedroom I could finally afford, first month's rent paid with my signing bonus. Mom, can I make a smiley face with the syrup? Noah asked, bottle already tilted over his plate. Yes, but keep it on your plate, I said. He didn't. The syrup smile spread across the table, 3 eyes and a crooked mouth that covered half the surface. I grabbed paper towels, then stopped. The mess wasn't urgent. The table would clean. Noah was happy creating sticky art with complete concentration. My phone buzzed on the counter. Marion's name appeared on the screen. No words. Just a sun emoji. I stared at that small yellow circle for 15 seconds. My mother, who'd spent 4 years in silence, who'd sat with me at the park 3 weeks ago, with no prepared speech, sending me a sun emoji on Saturday morning. Not, I'm sorry, or I love you, or any of the words that felt too big to fit through 4 years of absence. Just sun. Noah's syrup smiley face had 3 eyes and covered half the table. My mother sent me a sun emoji. These were the victories I didn't know to want. I typed back sun emoji. Press send before I could overthink it. That afternoon, after Noah's nap, I sat at my new home office desk, actual desk this time, not a kitchen table corner, and opened the fund's email system for the first time. My official access had started that morning. The inbox was empty except for automated welcome messages and IT setup instructions. I clicked compose. Subject line: First case, Agnes Brennan, 412 Maple Street. I typed the case details I'd memorized 2 years ago. Long-term resident, 30 years, occupancy, fixed income, displacement risk category 1, priority protection status, eligible for funds, housing stability grant, legal assistance, and community advocacy support. Agnes would be the first case my fund handled officially. The woman who'd opened her boarding house door to a pregnant stranger in the rain 4 years ago would be the first person I helped from this position. Before pressing send, I looked at the yellow note still taped to the wall above my desk. Community Development Fund, one day. I stood up, walked to the wall, and peeled the tape carefully. The paper came away, intact, corners slightly curled from 2 years and 9 months of being displayed. I sat back down and held it in both hands. I folded the note once, twice, 3 times, small enough to fit in a drawer, but too important to throw away. I opened the desk's top drawer, empty, except for pens and the photocopy of Noah's birth certificate I kept everywhere I worked, and placed the folded note inside. Not in the trash. Not on display. Just somewhere I'd know it existed when I needed to remember. I didn't need it on the wall anymore, but I needed to know it was still somewhere, proof that I'd made promises to myself when no one else was making promises to me. I pressed send on Agnes's file and closed my laptop. Outside my office, Noah slept in the apartment I could afford, with the job I'd earned through 3 years of work nobody paid me to do. In the drawer, the note I'd written when I had nothing but a plan and a baby and a neighborhood that needed someone to care. I didn't need it on the wall anymore, but I needed to remember I had to make promises to myself before anyone else could make promises to me. That's what dignity means. And to you, listening to my story, remember this: the promises you make to yourself matter more than the ones broken by others. Looking back, I realize I spent too long waiting for someone to rescue me. Like so many family Reddit stories you read online, I thought, if I could just explain, everything would fix itself. Don't make my mistake. Family betrayal revenge isn't about confronting them, it's about refusing to let their choices define your worth. Don't wait for permission to rebuild your life. What I learned is this: the best form of family betrayal revenge is building something they can never take away. When my father admitted we were wrong at that ceremony, I didn't need to respond because I'd already won. I believe God put me through those 4 years alone not to break me, but to show me my own strength. These family Reddit stories we share, they all teach the same lesson. Dignity comes from what you build for yourself, not what others give you permission to have. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below and tell me what you think about family betrayal. Revenge does quiet success matter more than confrontation? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more family Reddit stories like this one, subscribe to Family Betrayal Stories. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story includes fictional elements for storytelling and emphasis, but the message about dignity, resilience, and the strength it takes to rebuild alone, that's real. I hope it stays with you.